The girl witnessed a strange accident. Two people were lying on the ground. The person in front had broken handcuffs on their wrists. The person behind was holding on to the one in front. Were they chasing a fugitive? But the man wasn't wearing a uniform, and they weren't in a police car. The person in front reached out to Eve for help. Eve's face was filled with confusion and fear. She didn't get out of the car but slowed down. At that moment Eve noticed a suitcase on the road. A little further away there were two handguns. White powder was scattered on the road. Eve immediately understood everything. They were involved in a black market deal. Eve pulled out her phone to call the police. Just as the call went through, a voice echoed in her mind. She hung up the phone. Looking at the suitcase outside, she stood the two coils up. Then she used the thread to tie together the people and the guns. With the sound of gunfire, Eve quickly reversed the car. She grabbed the suitcase from the ground. When she checked the sewing kit, she realized a needle was missing. The needle was engraved with her name and she couldn't leave it behind. She returned to the scene to retrieve the needle. The man in the helmet, Mike, woke up. His hand slowly reached for the handgun. Eve saw him but couldn't bring herself to act. They were on a highway and cars could pass by at any moment. Eve cleaned up the scene, then helped Mike into the car. She drove him back to the tailor shop, but the gang leader tracked her down to the shop. In the end, Eve were taken out. What if Eve had called the police half a day ago? How would things have turned out then? Half a day ago, Eve saw the two men lying on the roadside after a black market deal gone wrong. At that moment, she picked up her phone to call the police. The sheriff arrived quickly. With years of experience, the sheriff quickly figured out what had happened, but there was no money to be found. Only 3 people were at the scene. 2 were on the ground. The sheriff turned her gaze to Eve. Now she was the prime suspect. The sheriff circled the car twice and finally found where the money was. The sheriff handcuffed the 3 of them to a corner. There was a wedding to officiate that day, so the sheriff left temporarily. Eve somehow got the keys and had Mike unlock everyone's handcuffs. Mike freed himself but betrayed the other 2. He took the money and left. Eventually, the gang leader caught up. Eve didn't make it out alive. Back to half a day ago, what if she had ignored it all and left without seeing anything? What would the outcome have been? She had to mend a wedding dress for the bride. After returning to the tailor shop, she grabbed her tools and rushed back. On her way back, she ran into the gang leader. Anyone who sees what they shouldn't is bound to be silenced. Eve immediately turned the car around and fled. She parked at the coffee shop and hid inside. The leader supporting the injured Jess followed her in. Eve used the thread to help Jess take out the leader. It was then that Eve noticed the suitcase in the leader's car. She decided to take the suitcase. Back at the tailor shop, Eve pried open the suitcase. Inside, she found a bomb. She barely escaped with her life crawling out of the wreckage. If Eve had just done her job and not returned to the shop, what would the outcome have been? Half a day ago, she finished mending the bride's dress. Following the next client's address, she went the other direction. That way she wouldn't have run into the 2 men in the black market deal. But she did cross paths with the gang leader. Eve was stopped.
Where's Tamina Pass?
Wait.
She thought she was going to be silenced, but to her surprise, the leader didn't harm her. Instead, he gave her some money.
This never happened.
As she watched the gang leader leave, Eve finally smiled.